We're not just witnessing the decline of beloved franchises, we're seeing them being stretched, twisted, and reshaped into something they were never meant to be. It's like watching a once great boxer reduced to gimmick fights with YouTubers. The name's still there, but the legacy, a bit tarnished. Hollywood is squeezing every last drop from these beloved names whilst throwing away the meaning. Now, what is an IP? IP stands for intellectual property. It refers to creations that have commercial value, including fictional characters, worlds, stories, and brands. When we say things like big franchises are milking IP, we're talking about studios using familiar characters and settings, often to excess, because they're already popular and should be profitable. So, how is Hollywood misusing these? Well, we're seeing legacy heroes rewritten as morally broken or useless, or both. Decades of tone and world building replaced with shallow rhetoric, and when fans speak up, audience scores plummet. When the box office numbers clearly show the decline, they don't reflect, they don't course correct. Who do they blame? Well, they blame us. They label us toxic, accuse us of review bombing, and write off legitimate criticism as hate, even when that criticism comes from the very people who've supported these franchises for decades, who, by the way, want to see it succeed. This isn't about hating diversity or fearing change, it's about calling out lazy writing,
Is that a radical left lunatic?
pandering, and the disrespectful execution of stories that once meant something. It's about demanding better stewardship. If you're going to continue a legacy, honour it. Don't turn cultural cornerstones into ideological mouthpieces. Don't sacrifice your existing audience for a chance at attracting a much smaller percentage of the general population. And don't think we're too stupid to notice. You're changing a story to fit ideologies and hit quotas, a lot of the time at the expense of developed characters and worlds, sometimes completely invalidating established lore. Yeah, we're looking at you, Rings of Power. So let's break it down. What's really happening? How misuse, not just overuse, is what's ruining modern media, and some ideas on how they can turn it around. Because as a fan myself, I don't want to revel in the decline of modern media. I want the heroes I grew up with watching to remain heroes. I also want the new generation to have their own heroes, and resurrecting the same IP because it's safe and it means profits, that'll never happen for them. And that's not fair for us to have our heroes dragged through the mud, and it's unfair for studios trying to make original content being overshadowed year after year by already established IPs, sequels, reboots, live action remakes. So let's get into it. Let's look at big major studios who should absolutely know better, just completely miss their core audience, not just once, but over and over again. It's like watching a chef cook a steak for a vegan crowd, act shocked when people send it back, and then making a roast chicken instead. Let's take Marvel. Kevin Feige and the MCU Brain Trust built the most successful film franchise in history. Now, a lot is riding on the soon-to-be-released Fantastic Four, which, if I'm right and it does poorly, might result in Doomsday being heavily reduced in scale, and might even see RDJ see sense, and unlike Hugh Jackman, leave his legacy intact.
They're gonna make him do this till he's 90.
But with how much they're probably paying him, that's unlikely. Now, do I want Fantastic Four to do well? Yes. Do I want to see Doomsday do well? Also yes. But the fact that they brought RDJ back screams desperation, and unfortunately seeing all those chairs unveiled, and I'm a huge MCU fan, I felt no excitement. Now, the MCU was largely on the backs of charismatic male-led heroes, Iron Man, Thor, Captain America. The audience, predominantly male statistically, culturally, demographically, it's not a secret, these movies were action-heavy, character-driven, and appealed to broad groups, but it was clear who was buying the bulk of the tickets on day one. So how has it declined so much? Well, after Endgame, let's look what they've done. They greenlit project after project centered on female leads. She-Hulk, Marvels, Eternals, Black Widow, Miss Marvel, Echo, Kate Bishop and Hawkeye, and probably some I'm missing out. Many of these landed with a thud and relied on nostalgia bait cameos to prop themselves up. Now, there's nothing wrong with female-led heroes. Black Widow was overdue her own film, although the timing was a bit wrong and the execution of these projects was simply terrible. She-Hulk basically turned into a half-hour TED Talk on why men are awful.
Here's the thing, Bruce. I'm great at controlling my anger. I do it all the time. But when I'm catcalled in the street, when incompetent men explain my own area of expertise to me, I do it pretty much every day, because if I don't, I will get called emotional or difficult, or might just literally get murdered. So I'm an expert at controlling my anger because I do it infinitely more than you.
It didn't just break the fourth wall, it punched the male audience in the face through it. Now every man in that show was either a creep, a dude bro, incompetent, or generally emasculated. When apparently the creator made this show knowing they'd get hate and backlash to mirror the male trolls in the show who hate She-Hulk just because she's a woman, but She-Hulk is an offshoot from the established Hulk character, and although it no doubt has a higher female readership than Hulk, a lot of men will still be fans of She-Hulk in this show, and she just doesn't relate to half of its established base. I mean, I went to watch the show, hoping for a good show. I mean, I watched Loki, I watched all the Netflix Marvel shows, and any other new content they were bringing out, Moon Knight. So I went into She-Hulk hopeful, and I stopped watching after the second or third episode when she bore down Bruce Banner. And Miss Marvel, a show we didn't really need or ask for, with a small fan base despite her being the centre of one of Marvel's biggest games that also received massive backlash, and part of more than a few cancelled comic runs, this was greenlit, it seems, just to tick a box to set up the Marvels. Now, I watched this show fully. I thought it was alright, but again, I can see why a lot of people wouldn't have tuned in. And I think the blame for this lies primarily with Disney trying to pump out as much content as possible to justify the cost of Disney+. They've not only done this with Marvel but also Star Wars. With a huge selection of new animated show that barely anyone watched, to live-action big-budget shows like The Mandalorian that started off strong and slowly is becoming forgotten due to its terrible direction. Ahsoka, its lackluster treasure hunt plot and even worse choreography. Acolyte, which retconned lore, pandered to the smallest audience possible and suffered from poor writing, which is unfortunate as the lightsaber choreography and it was amazing. So when studios greenlight projects without considering who their audience actually is, or worse, deliberately antagonize their existing audience to virtue signal online, it's no surprise they flop. You can't build loyalty while telling your core demographic, oh, this isn't for you anymore. It's cinematic self-sabotage. I think I'm wrong about that. Just look at any Comic-Con with people dressed as Marvel characters, Star Wars characters. It's like 80% male and then the rest females. So if the goal is to expand the audience, great, bring in new viewers, diversify, evolve, but don't alienate the ones you've got here in the first place. Don't throw out the fan base because you're too lazy to try and write for both. Respect your audience, respect the IP and its lore, and maybe, just maybe, stop insulting the people who buy half the tickets. Now, as I've said, there's nothing wrong with strong female leads. We've had them for decades, from Ripley, Sarah Connor, Lara Croft, Beatrix Kiddo. They kicked ass, had arcs, flaws, personality, and crucially, they didn't need to step on men's heads to get there. Sometimes they did literally, but I mean figuratively. Somewhere along the line, Hollywood got lazy. Empowerment stopped being earned and started being installed like a software patch. We need this woman to be able to compete with men, so let's just make her that powerful straight away. This is where we get a term called Mary Sue, and it's a problem with quite a few female leads. Now, since we're on Rey here, I can't help think on the animated Mulan movie, likely because of the staff training, and Rey's got a staff at the start of the films. Mulan, she's strong in character and spirit, but weak physically. She's a woman, she goes into an army filled with men, she continuously loses to Captain Lee and they're sparring, but doesn't give up. And also, if you've never sang Let's Get Down to Business, you're a liar or you've never seen this gem of a movie. Now, this is a movie that shows how we can accept a female lead. Animated or not, she goes through trials and hardships, she becomes stronger. Rey and many others, we don't get to see any of that. They're straight away Mulan Act 3. She's went through all the sparring, she's beat Lee, she's got the arrow at the top of the pole, and then the movie starts. And it's easily fixed. It's just a scene or two showing them how they've learned to fight, at least making it easier to swallow that a junk raider gets to what seems like a Jedi Knight level within a single movie, patronizes Han Solo on his own ship, and defeats a Sith who was trained by not only Luke Skywalker, but Palpatine as well. In media, it definitely feels like we're in a Girlboss era. But let's look at Ghostbusters 2016, a classic all-male ensemble rebooted with an all-female cast. Not one or two swaps, so not to alienate your established audience, your core audience from back when the original came out, but the entire main team gender flipped. And what did they do with the one male character? They make Chris Hemsworth a dim-witted himbo, whose entire job is to look pretty, say stupid things. It's reverse objectification, a parody of masculinity to even the scales, as if this somehow makes the comedy better. It's not empowering, it's preachy, and it feels like revenge fanfic with a studio budget.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
And fans, they've noticed, they're tired of it, and worse, we're now wary of it. Critical Drinker recently nailed this in his Ballerina review, mentioning Furiosa. Neither were bad movies, but they've both essentially flopped. Not because they had women in the lead, but because audiences are exhausted from being fed one-dimensional girl boss reskins of franchises that have once had substance. So now innocent projects are being caught in the crossfire. Everyone who looked at Ballerina thought, that's just a John Wick movie, where they've made the lead female. And they might not be wrong, but the movie wasn't necessarily bad. Now, this isn't backlash from incels or man babies. This is the reaction of general audiences, the same ones who happily supported Ripley, Trinity, Katniss, or Celine, and any other ones that I've mentioned above. There's a key difference between a strong woman and a lazy archetype, and studios, they've forgotten that. Studios seem to think female empowerment is diminish the established male characters to make the women feel bigger, but they forget that the audience liked those male characters. Sometimes they're characters that we grew up with. We just wanted stories that respected the legacy and introduced new talent that continued the great stories that we grew up with. Instead, we get forced messaging, smug dialogue, a sense that fans who didn't love it are somehow on the wrong side of history. So why is this bad for our IPs? Well, because it disrespects our favourite characters, turns them into punchlines, tarnishes their legacy, it points and laughs at the established audience, or simply ignores us and throws nostalgia bait into the movie, hoping it gets a bite, and the buzz of that being in the movie distracts from the paper-thin plot or the characters. It also creates backlash that ends up hurting even the well-written female leads. So don't create female-empowered characters by making them stand on the shoulders of men. Instead, write female characters with real flaws, real arcs, real growth, let them struggle, fail, learn, and triumph. And that's how you build audience connection and lasting impact. We've got Ironheart coming out in a few days. When this video goes live, it might already be out, but we might see the tropes that I've mentioned above in this show. The trailer kind of points towards Riri following the Mary Sue path, being great at everything straight away. They have her being called a genius about 20 times in the trailer, and looking at it as well, her male co-stars are evil, Han Solo, I forget his name, but he is made to be the butt of a joke at the end about a sign. So that to me hints towards that he's going to be a person that is made to be the butt of a joke quite often to prop Riri up. But this project was made years ago, so we can maybe write this one off as Marvel being obligated to release it, which might explain why all the episodes are out within 2 weeks. At this point, many modern blockbusters aren't anchored by good storytelling. They're built around nostalgia bait, clunky direction, and last-minute cameo drops. Movies like Everything Everywhere All at Once, Parasite, and Sinners are left with box office scraps when compared to big IP releases like the new Lilo and Stitch live action against Sinners, Everything Everywhere All at Once against Maverick and Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, and finally Parasite, which likely suffered due to it being in its native language of Korean and coming out near Spider-Man Far From Home leaving cinemas, and The Joker being released, Frozen 2 coming out just shortly after. Now, you'll notice all the movies that are raking it in, despite these smaller scale and smaller budget movies being more critically acclaimed, is simply because of one fact: they're established big IPs with an established audience. Now, there's no studio to blame here, it's us choosing with our wallets what to go and see, but the problem is how saturated the media is right now with sequels, remakes, reboots, spin-offs, live action versions. It's lazy, blatant cash grabs, relying on nostalgia to drive box office figures, and, well, it works. This isn't necessarily a bad thing when it's done right, Maverick being a prime example of a movie that reignited cinema post Clearly Our Vacation is Doomed era, but it's becoming an issue where studios get comfortable that audience will just buy tickets to anything with their favourite characters in it, so they pump out project after project filled with garbage writing, allegory, fan service, or nostalgia moments to try and distract you from the fact that the writing is garbage, and it leaves these great universes and characters forever marked by their greed and incompetence. So when creators hijack our beloved IPs as emotional soapboxes to push personal agendas instead of telling meaningful stories, it's just exploitation wrapped in nostalgia. Now let's cover some of the main issues over the last few years. Rings of Power is a prime example. They spent $1 billion just to contradict Tolkien's lore, alienate a fan base that to this day still likely rewatch Lord of the Rings Extended Edition at least once a year or at least every 2 years. How do you that up? All you needed was to follow the source material, just like Peter Jackson did. Like, he made minor changes but pretty much stuck to what Tolkien wrote. Have amazing set pieces, have amazing costumes, have a big battle or two. That was it. Now, what should have felt like a celebration of Middle-earth turned into a husk of Tolkien's work, trying to humanize orcs with families, falling into the Girlboss trope with Galadriel, retconning lore by introducing Gandalf into the show, and well, we could go on, right? But we'll move on to the next issue of big IPs in most recent years. Star Wars. So this, as well as Rings of Power, could likely be its own video, but this is an IP that is one of my favourites, likely one of your favourites, and we had The Force Awakens trying to reboot the franchise, and it was essentially a carbon copy of A New Hope. We had Rey, who was a Mary Sue, overpowered, underdeveloped, and patronising at stages. Finn who was an actually intriguing setup tossed aside for comic relief in later movies. Luke Skywalker, reduced to a bitter coward, tosses his own father's lightsaber into the ocean and drinks space cow milk. Snoke, wasted. When revealed, Snoke was a mystery. That's what kind of got you a bit hooked. Who is this guy? And then he was revealed to be a Palpatine puppet, and he should have realistically been someone more narratively significant like Darth Plagueis. That's what they should have went with. You're not going to convince me otherwise. Darth Plagueis was the one working on a way to stay immortal through the Force by utilising midichlorians. Maybe before Palpatine killed him, or because of Palpatine killing him, he figured it out. It would have made so much more sense. Anyway, Ahsoka, she falls off a cliff and has a vague Force vision with Anakin, which was just complete hype bait, just to get loads of online engagement. The Acolyte, it had some of the most impressive lightsaber choreography of any Star Wars show that I've seen, marred by bizarre plot choices, Jedis committing suicide by poison. So stupid. Being able to assassinate a Jedi Knight without a lightsaber. And here's a free idea for if by some chance there's a Lucasfilm exec watching this. If you want to get fans back, this is something I think we would all love. And if you do enjoy this little idea, don't forget to subscribe. I'll plug that now. Let's go back to the Dark Roots of the Sith and make a Knights of the Old Republic style series. Knights of the Old Republic is one of my favourite games. If you've not played it, there's a section of the game where you go to the Sith homeworld and you see the ruins of the Sith Academy and learn about historic figures like Exar Kun and how the Rule of Two came to be. So I think we should have a show about the downfall of the Sith Academy, the rise of the Rule of Two, something like that. I think the Acolyte, but actually sticking with lore. High stakes, no forced ideology. It's a story that fans would enjoy, and I'm pretty sure it would make Disney millions. There you go. Now, Jurassic World Dominion. The previous movie hinted at an Earth roaming with dinosaurs and potential big battle set pieces where dinosaurs are having to be, fought back or something like that. This is what we envisioned, right? Instead, we get a corporate biotech thriller. The original cast paraded around for nostalgia points, but the core concept of dinosaurs are loose in the modern world was just left there. A massive misfire. Doctor Who. Instead of bold storytelling, we had allegory shoved through your screen into your face. No subtlety here. We also had the Doctor turn gay, despite previous hetero romances with Ten and Rose, and having the Doctor's core characteristic be hijacked by a campy actor who thinks that all fans should touch grass. How did that work with the ratings then? Yeah, so Zack Snyder's vision for Justice League as well was dark, coherent, visually bold, definitely Nolan-esque, and to me it didn't feel like the Superman I grew up with, but I enjoyed the movies. And Warner Brothers insisted on pushing out Batman v Superman, even though Man of Steel wasn't originally made to have a sequel that went into a wider universe. And Batman v Superman was just too political, too dark to enjoy Superman. Batman was brilliant, I thought, in that movie. The 5-minute warehouse scene was one of the best Batman scenes I've seen in modern cinema. Then disaster struck Snyder, and Warner Brothers saw the opportunity to bring Whedon in to MCUify the Justice League movie, which I've seen the Snyder cut and I definitely prefer that. The Whedon version of Justice League is just tonally jarring. It's got terrible CGI, stupid jokes, and it's just all round bad. And I think the CGI is probably one of the main things people remember from that rather than the story or the villain. So this isn't just blaming bad writing masked by nostalgia, it's highlighting lazy creative decisions, careless scripts, and disregard for audience expectations. By throwing in Easter eggs, one-off cameos, and shock reveals, studios rely on familiarity while abandoning good storytelling and sometimes even the core of what made the IP resonate. Fans want new stories, they want great characters, and they want to be surprised but not insulted. But when IPs are treated like easy cash grabs instead of living worlds worth honouring, the result is apathy, not excitement, which is kind of what we're getting now with loads of big IPs, Superman as well, which is coming out soon, expected to just get over 100 million on its opening weekend. If that doesn't scream apathy to you, I don't know what does. Now, a hero is only as good as the villain they're up against. What elevated movies like The Dark Knight was the villain, Heath Ledger as the Joker. That brought that movie up to a level that hasn't really been seen much since. And right now, most movie villains are on the red carpet instead of actually on the big screen. We've got Disney demanding Marvel pump out flop after flop, and Lucasfilm also following that. We have Warner Bros. Too impatient to build a universe that feels connected that they had to reboot theirs within 10 years. And as fans, we're vilified for having opinions. We're the ones buying the tickets, streaming the shows, supporting the merch. Yet our preferences are reduced to shallow crumbs of fan service, while studio execs, showrunners and actors lecture us on what's best for the character that we've loved for years, and they just picked the script up for in the last year. Let's take Ironheart as a case study. A character whose comic run was largely panned. Instead of exploring the fan favourite armour wars with Rhodey, An OG character with history, they pushed ahead with Ironheart, and now the early backlash is rolling in. We're hearing the same old labels, racist, sexist, or both. But here's the thing, the audience that you're talking to, they loved Black Panther, they loved Okoye, she became an instant icon, and Angela Bassett's performance in Wakanda Forever was award-worthy. Her monologue still gives me goosebumps. So no, it's not about race or gender, it's about Marvel consistently failing to write compelling lead female characters. All they seem to do is vilify men and fall into the Mary Sue trap and strip away the arcs that earn their growth. So, Marvel fans, be prepared to be called racist and sexist should you dislike this show when it airs. Right, I've had my moan about that. Let's get back to the on-screen villains. In classic cinema, villains weren't just bad, they were memorable, terrifying, and in the best cases, relatable. They had presence, purpose, and sometimes just enough logic make you think, well, he's kind of got a point. Thanos right now is kind of the gold standard of modern superhero cinema, not because of his power level, but because of his conviction. His methods were brutal, his logic sound, well, to a degree, and he wasn't trying to rule the universe, he was just trying to fix it in his own twisted way. That's what made him stick, and he was slowly built up over a decade. Compare that to Justice League Steppenwolf, a bland villain in my opinion. His motivations, I want to go back into Darkseid's good books. That's it. No depth, no moral conflict, no real personality. You forget him as soon as the credits roll. And Darkseid, the big bad of the DC universe, who's meant to be the counterpart to Thanos. I'm not going to get into who was made first, but you know what I mean. This is meant to be DC's Thanos. Well, they showcase him getting his ass kicked when we first see him and running off with his tail between his legs and then forgetting where the planet was that he was just fighting on that has the anti-life equation.
What an idiot! Oh, what a loser!
Great way to set up your big bad villain. I'll also make a quick mention of Wonder Woman's Ares, since we've mentioned DC, because that movie was very well received, but I felt the reason it was well received was purely because of the no man's land scene and how well Gal Gadot fits into the Wonder Woman outfit. Ares was a very forgettable villain. Like, a lot of people say they like that movie, but then not really think who the villain was, and that film could have been a lot better had they decided to go a different way with who the villain was. Instead of sticking with Star Wars and other big IPs, we'll go to James Bond, possibly one of the most forgettable Bond villains ever. Dominic Green. He's a businessman, he hoards water, pretends to run an eco group. That's it. He's not scary, not charming, not even slimy enough to be memorable, he just sort of exists. It feels like a filler film for Daniel Craig's run. Contrast that with someone like Silva in Skyfall, a man broken by the system, a previous 00 out for revenge. You might not agree with him, but you understand him. He had a philosophy and he made you sit up and pay attention. That's how you write a villain. Palpatine, again, bringing him back in Rise of Skywalker was like reheating toast. He had no new plan, no real presence, no build-up. His return wasn't teased, it was like the previous writer for The Last Jedi didn't leave any notes about who this person was, so they were just like, cool, I guess. It should have been plagiarism, whatever. So we've already beaten him, there's no tension, no drama, just repetition. It would be like if the MCU brought back Thanos for Secret Wars and he was the main villain. Yeah, he was iconic, but his story's over. You can't summon the same awe twice, except maybe with Vader in Rogue One, but that was one scene. He wasn't the main villain through the whole movie. Villains like heroes need arcs. And when you deny them that, they're just another form of nostalgia bait. A bit like how Marvel's rehired RDJs do. A lot of fans, including myself, were very much underwhelmed by that choice. Now, we're drowning in a sea of villains who vanish from memory as quickly as they appear. I don't want to go through all of them, but I'll just put a wee bit up above and you can sort of see, I mean, you'll remember them as I show you them, but you'll realise that they don't really stick in your memory too much. Cool powers, maybe. Cool presence? No. Studios, it seems, have forgotten how to write presence. When Darth Vader enters a room, the atmosphere changed. He doesn't need to speak. You feel it. The silence, the fear, the awe. Now everything's played for laughs. Villains in the room potentially threatening innocence and we just get stupid quips. And villains even sometimes are the ones doing this. And they get defeated by plot armor. Vanish after one film. No ideology, no fear, no gravitas. Until studios remember that great villains make great stories, we'll be stuck with a parade of forgettable villains who should be given a lot more care, sometimes than even the main hero. The main hero should already be established. The villain is the one that you need to build up. So let's not sugarcoat this. Franchises aren't dying because they're old, they're dying because the people handling them have stopped caring about what made them great. The same studios that built massive fandoms are now alienating them. They ignore lore, replace substance with shallow messaging and call it modernizing. But really it's just a desperate lasso to rope in these younger viewers and burning bridges in the process. It's not progress, it's greed wearing a progressive mask. Audiences aren't tired of these universes, they're tired of the way they're being treated. It's not sexism, it's not racism, it's not fan entitlement, it's disappointment. To wrap up the conclusion, here's what studios need to understand. Respect your core audience. Reinvention's fine, evolution necessary, but don't alienate the fans who built the foundation. Mocking or sidelining them is a guaranteed way to kill goodwill that you're banking on, and placating us with a bit of fan service doesn't cut it. Write strong characters. Empowerment isn't about making someone flawless, it's about giving them depth, struggle, and growth, male or female. No character should become an instant master of everything because the script needs them to. Make compelling villains. Great stories need great antagonists. Give us motivation, ideology, presence. Without a worthy threat, your hero's journey falls flat. Use nostalgia as spice, not main course. Clever callback? Perfect. Basing your entire story around, oh hey, remember this? Lazy. Stick to the tone. Sudden tonal shifts destroy immersion. For me anyway. If your film sets up drama, don't undercut it with a forced quip. Not everything needs the Marvel wink at the camera humour, especially now that the audiences are tired of it. Finally, end stories when they're complete. You need to know when to walk away, or at least give the world, the characters, a break for a decade or two. A well-told arc is better than dragging legacy through endless spin-offs. Return of the King ended beautifully. Game of Shadows was a natural conclusion. We didn't need 3 Hobbit movies. We didn't need a live-action remake of Lion King. We don't need 4 or 5 Creed movies, although these movies are okay. In my view, they're declining, and now we're getting another one. We don't need another Ocean's 11 movie, but we're getting that. I could go on. There's loads of these in production, and it would take up most of the video to go through them. But if you look at next year's releases, the majority of them are all sequels, reboots, and so on. Now, these IPs are massive for a reason. Studios act like slapping together a few nostalgic shots, a bloated budget, and some fan service is enough to keep us turning up. But I think we've seen through it. We're tired. Box office for movies this year and next, I think, will reflect that. And going by the numbers for Superman's opening weekend, as I mentioned earlier, despite me being very excited about it, I don't think it's going to cut it. And I, for one, would love nothing more to see these stories rise again, assuming that they're written with care, conviction, and actually respect for fans. But without a massive overhaul for those in power at DC and other studios, I doubt that will happen. James Gunn has got DC now, so we don't really know what direction that's going to go in, how it's going to respect fans, but looking at the trailers, it's given me a bit of hope. It seems to be the Superman and other heroes that are in that I grew up with, but there is some off dialogue that I'm unsure of.
Around doing important stuff.
If you enjoyed this video, hit a like. If not, drop a comment, tell me why, what I got wrong, what I missed. Don't forget to subscribe for more, because I will be doing another video on the misuse of IP in gaming, because unfortunately this video, as you can tell by the length, and thank you for watching this far, was just a bit too unruly to fit gaming in as well. So we'll be taking a deep dive into that and covering other things like Star Wars in gaming and how they've went from great games like Knights of the Old Republic to, well, that, yes. So thanks for watching, and as always, cheerio.
Is that a